What are some of the biggest betrayals in friendship? I met my best friend when we were teenagers. He got married at 25 and his husband became my other best friend. We saw each other through everything, losing jobs, parents, wonderfully good and bad times. Nobody could make me laugh harder. We delighted in each other's company, taking many foreign adventures together, and we looked forward to many more. We had a long-standing plan that we would all retire together somewhere hot, pooling our money to get the best place we could. His husband once loudly complained that since he was a little older than us, he would die first and we'd be having fun without him. I remember feeling a sense of foreboding when he said that and told him not to speak words that might be casting shadows in the future. I wonder now if I knew what was coming on some level. A few short years later, my best friend started to get ill. We could see that he had a strange gait when he walked. He was losing weight and suffering all manner of strange symptoms, tremors, dizzy spells, etc. His husband and I were frantic with worry and begged him to see a doctor. He's a scientist, so I knew he would have a good idea of what was happening. He told me that he thought it was Parkinson's disease and he couldn't face going to a doctor and getting a diagnosis because his biggest fear was that it was motor neuron disease and he couldn't even contemplate such a terrible disease. He worked away through the week and we would call each other. He'd confide about incidents where he had collapsed and asked me not to tell his husband. I'd agree because I didn't want my husband to be as worried as I was. Then he went rapidly downhill. He could hardly walk and was covered in bruises because he was falling over all the time. He cried and told me he was sure it was motor neuron and begged me to make sure he wouldn't suffer at the end. I looked up the cost of taking him to Dignitas in Switzerland and told him I was sure I could swing it if it came to that. Finally, the day came when he collapsed and had a seizure at work. They called an ambulance and his husband called me to let me know and said he would keep me up to date. I told him that I was actually relieved. At least we had a fair chance of finding out what we were dealing with. I went to visit him in the hospital the next day and found him in an incredibly confused state. He thought we were still teenagers and were at work together. I was obviously really worried and asked the staff what was going on and why he was so confused. His doctor came over to give us their diagnosis.